Welcome, ladies and mentligents, to another wonderful narration. I'm your host. Here's a kiss in case you don't finish the video.
Mwah.
Today's story comes from /HFY Wordsmith, Regal Legal Eagle. Please show your love to the author. Links are below in the description. Billy Bob Space Trucker, Chapter Sept OC. I keep writing, but I feel like I might have strayed from strict HFY material. Feel free to let me know if anyone feels this way. I want to tell a story, but I don't want to betray my roots. Either way, Chapter 7, coming in strong. Chapter Sept. Jean Renaud was perplexed by the reports he was reading. While the UHG didn't have nearly the same level of espionage funding as those crazy Americans, they had a very well-established diplomatic service. It was a two-government system that had served them well since making contact with the galactic government. The Americans would punch newly met Xenos in the nose, and the UHG would show up with a tissue and smooth things over. It especially helped when they said that the Americans wouldn't attack people who played nice with the UHG. It wasn't perfect, but it worked well enough. Even if the Xenos mostly used the freemium translators, which only came loaded with English and Russian. A side effect of the space race, making Xenos think humans only had two languages. But today, his job was becoming increasingly difficult. He had to stop for a moment, setting the files aside as he hit a button to call in his aides. As they began to assemble in his office, he took a moment to collect his thoughts and straighten his hair. He might be needed to visit some embassies today. But then, his aides were assembled, and he spoke up. What is going on today? I've never seen so many communiques from Xenos we've never heard of before. It sounds like the Americans are starting another turf war, but I can't find where. Not to mention they normally make it clear they aren't the same government as the rest of us. Monsieur, I have been getting an urgent communique from some new species we are unfamiliar with. They say our alliance with their lifelong enemies makes us enemies of the galactic government as a whole. What? Who are the species in question? I haven't been informed of any alliances. His aides all shifted a little, as they clearly didn't have the answers their chief diplomat needed. No. This has to be some sort of misunderstanding. The sector that has been a flame of chaos these past few days isn't even within our scheduled diplomatic services. There shouldn't be any humans out there at all. What if the Americans are lying to us about their military movements? An aide ventured. To what end? If they detected a grave threat to humanity, they'd be attacking with everything they've got right now. And clearly, they aren't aware they're in a war. If anyone would know, it's the Americans. Maybe it is just a lone human. Jean looked skeptical for a moment at his aides. You mean to tell me that a single lone human could cause so much trouble? From what I'm told, someone has hospitalized a Galactic Special Forces team, killed members of the Galactic Secret Service, and aligned us with a species that isn't on the Galactic Registry. How could one person possibly do all this? As he huffed, another aide came rushing in. Monsieur, the Americans sent us a file from their intelligence services. They think they know who's causing the trouble. Who is it? Terrorists? Religious fanatics? Worse, they say this is the work of an American named Billy Bob Space Trucker Billy Bob and Emily were crying out as they got sucked down into the trap door. They were swept along a metal chute before being shot out into some sort of large arena with dirt floors and smooth walls. There were obvious doors around the arena as well, no doubt containing the opponents they'd face. Billy Bob quickly jumped up, making sure his weapons were all in place as he held his bat at the ready. Emily groaned out, brushing herself off with two hands, while the other two pushed her slim body back up. Billy Bob was watching the doors as he glanced around the place, then back at Emily. Hey, that freaky fucking space clown. Is he going to make me fight the prisoners? Emily shook her head as she tried to compose herself. No, A space clown wouldn't leave an ascendance ritual up to chance. They'd fill their arena with the most fearsome creatures they could find. Ascendance ritual? Are we dealing with some kind of fucked up space magic here? Magic? Never mind. I'm going to stop the ritual anyway, not like it matters. He was on edge as he could feel his adrenaline starting to pump through his body. The fights he'd been in the last few days had been quick, dirty little affairs, but this sounded like something that was going to really test his limits. Good thing Billy Bob had been in plenty of fights before. He kept his guns holstered for now. That space clown wouldn't start with his best. He'd wear Billy Bob down. Then he grimaced and clutched as a horrid combination of that awful laughter and a bad PA system filled the arena with noise. You shall be the most excellent sacrifice. Weird-ass space clown god loves feasting upon new species. And such a feisty one you are. I hope you're not too hard on my pet's digestion. The PA echoes that awful laughter as it cut off, and Billy Bob hunched down as a far gate opened up. But then he blinked and relaxed a bit in confusion. Headless Ewoks. The creatures in front of him looked indeed like headless Ewoks. They had large black eyes on their shoulders. Creepy, but harmless. The fuck? Does he think these will do to me? He glanced over at Emily, who had taken flight, which he had totally forgotten she could do. Those long wings and the gossamer threads between her arms moving quickly to keep her in the air. Billy Bob, those are vicious carnivores. They can take down huge pack animals in minutes. Get the fuck out of town. He looked back and then saw one of them open what he thought was the torso. It was filled with a black void, filled with rows of sharp teeth. Jesus, tap-dancing Christ, space teddy piranhas. He gulped and then thought it over for a moment. Wait, but they're still tiny. The little teeth-filled critters seemed to sniff at the air and then started to froth at the mouth, which was rather horrifying, as their mouths were where he felt their chests should be. Oh, really? That's not good, he said to himself as he gripped his bat tighter. Looking at the pack of critters, he'd counted about a dozen. One of them near the front seemed to be a brace sort and rushed towards Billy Bob. They were quick, but not as fast as he had feared. It seemed like growing up on a high-gravity planet really had advantages. When it leapt up at him, he could see a murderous red glow in those otherwise black eyes. But he wasn't having any of that. He swung his Louisville true, and with a resounding crunch, the creature went flying back, limp and lifeless. That's at least a double, he cried out with a laugh. But then the rest of the pack began to charge. Cursing, he began to back up, relying on the fact they were animals and not intelligent. They started to leap up at him, seeming to go for his neck and face with those grubby hands. He could only imagine the carnage if they latched on and started to chew. But he wasn't going to let that happen. As they jumped, he would swing, bashing them right back down. His adrenaline was really flowing after his fourth line drive, and as another decided to try and latch onto his leg, he was quick enough to simply stomp down on it with his steel-toed boot. He had to shudder, though, as he felt it crunch and sort of pop beneath his foot. Oh, fuck, that was gross. He now had some purple stains on his boots as the second half of the pack backed up. Only 6 left as they began to try and fan out, likely wanting to rush him all at once. But again, Billy Bob wasn't a pack animal, he could think. So instead of letting them get into position, he ran forward, bringing the bat down on another of those creepy space teddy piranhas. Whack-a-mole, he cried out as he did it. By now, more than half their little pack was dead, and the rest seemed to have it. They were animals after all. They began to turn and scurry back towards the door they'd come from, but Billy Bob wasn't entirely done. He chased after them, smashing another with his bat as the doors started to close. Seeing his chance, he caught up with the closest little biter and gave it a boot, watching the thing squeal and go flying between the closing doors as he held up his hands straight in the air. Uprights! Emily slowed the flapping of her wings and arms as she glided down to the ground. That was impressive. I've never seen anyone just stomp on those before. Their celebration was cut short as another large door began to open. This one ran all the way to the ceiling of the arena as they heard a growl and the shifting of something big. As he watched as what could best be described as a green space ogre began to stomp out of the opening. It was humanoid and about 20 feet tall. It had a rippling gut, but green scales like a lizard, and an extra arm coming out of the chest. Each of the hands ended in 3 sharp-looking claws, and it had a fat tail that slapped at the ground. But Billy Bob was laughing as he pointed at the creature's face. "Fucker looks like a pug! A derpy fucking pug!" He laughed again while looking at those bulging eyes and deep underbite, a pink tongue hanging out over its lips. "Ah, I'll call it a pogre," he said, before it unleashed an angry scream. Yeah, should be easy." "Billy Bob, that's from a super heavy gravity planet like yours." He looked back at Emily and then at the pogre who stomped on the ground enough to make the place shake. Dropping his bat, Billy Bob pulled out both his Bowie knives and began to run towards the pogre. It screeched out and swung at him with a massive arm, but he rolled under it, moving between the creature's legs. It seemed surprised and tried to step back to better attack Billy Bob once more, but he was bust, stabbing along the area he figured had to be the Achilles tendon, cutting and hacking as best he could. The creature cried out in pain as it leaked green blood, staggering to try and stomp on Billy Bob, who kept moving. Finally, he heard something like a massive pair of shorts splitting open, and then watched the muscle roll up into the creature's calf as it screamed in agony and toppled backwards. Oh God, why is fighting creatures so awful? This is nothing like the movies. He winced, not having expected that reaction, despite the fact that he knew what would happen in theory. The creature fell to the ground, thrashing and crying in pain as he stood at its feet, unsure what to do now. In the stories, the knight would gloriously slay the dragon, but Billy Bob felt bad. "I don't like fighting creatures. Soldiers are way easier to kill and rationalize in my head," he said as he looked back at Emily. But with his attention shifted, he missed the thrashing foot of the creature coming at him and promptly got kicked. He went flying, hitting the dirt and rolling as he groaned in pain himself. But after he slid to a stop, he paused and got to his feet. He was bruised, and breathing made him feel a twinge on his right side that hadn't been there, but he didn't think anything was broken as he collected the knives he'd dropped while flying through the air. Fuck! Teaches me to stop paying attention. He looked at the creature still trashing and realized it was just in immense pain. "Do I kill it or something? I feel bad now." Emily looked surprised. "It was going to eat us, and it just kicked you." "Yeah, but it's just a stupid animal." He winced as the PA came back on.
"Finish it. Freaky Space Clown God demands it."
"Fuck you. Come down here and do it so I can rip your head off and shit down your neck." Billy Bob screamed up at the ceiling.
"Fine. In my final bit, so wipe me out and finish the job for you."
The final door opened as a trio of creatures began to walk out. These were quadrupeds that looked something like a mix between a bull and a frog. But not a bullfrog. Billy Bob thought over the conundrum of naming for a moment as he looked them over. They had large bulbous throats and semi-amphibious features, but horns and large moorbull-like facial features. Space? Frog bulls? Maybe. He'd work on it. They stood at the opening of the door, and then their throats began to enlarge. The trio then began to emit a sound that was incredibly loud, but nothing like the rock concerts Billy Bob had been to in his youth. It took Billy Bob a moment, but as he listened to the deep bass and strange warbling tones wash over him, he laughed. The fuck is this? Dubstep? I mean, it's got a beat, but I can't dance to it. He looked over at Emily to see what she thought, but she was writhing on the ground, whimpering and clutching her head with all four hands. Oh, shit! Finally, he pulled his M1911 free of the holster and shot the center. Dub. Skrill Frog. He'd work on the name, but he shot the center creature in the throat. It looked surprised for half a second, before exploding in a mist of blue and green guts as the other two ruptured and exploded as well. Billy Bob closed his eyes and turned away, but the gore and splatter didn't reach him. He heard the whine of machinery as the doors tried to close, but were apparently broken from the close gas explosion. The empty chamber behind them had what he thought looked like another door and a security panel. "Come on, Emily, let's get out of here," he said as he holstered his gun again and retrieved his bat. Then he began to give the ceiling the double bird as hard as he could. "Billy Bob 3! Space Clown 0!" Emily staggered to her feet, wincing as she limped towards the security panel. "I'm coming for you, Space Clown!" Billy Bob Space Trucker. Chapter Hewitt, Okiok.